Hi everyone, I'm Lei, I'm the host of this program, and today we're going to talk about high intelligence, giftedness and talent, and how does this work together with the Dutch education system, and also give the parents a little bit hint and advice how to treat and work together with the child. So I invited a special guest, Dick Verwij. So Dick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course, thank you Lei for inviting me. My name is Dick Verwij. I am a trainer and educator, and I work a lot with teachers in the Dutch educational system. Apart from that, I have my own business. I coach people that have trouble with their own intelligence. It might seem a bit strange, but being gifted doesn't always mean that you have a great life. We'll talk about that more today. So divided by those two, I make it my mission in life to help people reach their full potential. I like that a lot, and that's for the main part because as a young child myself, I had a pretty good run at school. I was quick with things, I learned very quickly, and that lasted until I was about 15 years old. And then all of a sudden I found out that what I was doing all that time, up to that point, wasn't enough anymore to get good grades. So I had a real terrible time at school trying to get into the next class. And I found out that, well, at the moment I thought, well, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was, but after a while, especially because of the work I do now, I found out that you can be pretty smart and still struggle at school because you didn't get to develop the right skill set you need to be successful academically. So that's my mission in life at this point, to make sure people don't make the same mistakes that I made.
Yeah, great, Dick. Thank you for sharing this kind of story. So when I first learned about giftedness, I was thinking about genius, people like Darwin, like Einstein. And I think maybe it's good just to give a definition or showing us how about the IQ, the intelligence, and what's the talent?
Yeah. Of course. Well, the people you name, Einstein, Darwin, those of course are very brilliant people. Especially in their field, and that has a strong correlation with intelligence. And I can pretty safely say they probably had a pretty high IQ. But if you look at IQ just as a number, we talk about highly giftedness when you have an IQ of 130 or over. But well, if you look at it very objectively, it's an IQ number is just a number that tells you how good you are at performing a particular test. It doesn't necessarily say a lot about other talents you have. You can be very good at interpersonal communication. There are very smart people that are not very good at interpersonal communication. So talent and IQ are a bit different. If you look at this graph, this is what we call the Gauss curve, and it plots where most people fall in certain measurements. It could be height, it could be shoe size. In this case, it's IQ points, and the average IQ point is 100. So if you have an IQ of 100, you are in the middle, smack in the middle. If you're below that, then you struggle a bit more at school. If you're above that, you probably find that school is easier for you to do. And the top of the curve, you can see that's 68%. That's what you call in mathematics. Mathematics, that's the word I was looking for. If you have one standard deviation above or below, so it's IQ point 85 or 115, you see that roughly 68% of the people fall within that category. Our Dutch educational system aims at that percentage because if you have a good curriculum to teach people how to read and to write and to perform maths, you reach 68% of those people, and that's a lot. And apart from that, we do have methods of differentiation. So children who struggle a little bit with what they have to learn, you can differentiate to the below, to the 70, and some kids are smarter and quicker, learn a little bit faster. So for them, they differentiate above, and that means that you get roughly about 95% of children. But if you speak about an IQ of 130 or further, higher, that's what highly giftedness means. You see that you only have about 2.3%. And the Dutch educational system struggles to get a good handle on these kids because they learn so quickly and so fast that they hardly ever come out of their comfort zone. So everything is within their comfort zone, and that means that well, pretty much anything they have to learn feels like it's just they already know it.
Yeah, take for granted.
There's no struggle. There's no real effort put in to learn what you have to learn, and that can lead to a lot of problems later on.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So this is about the intelligence side, and there are also people talking about talent.
Yes. Yeah, IQ is pretty narrow. That's what you can measure with a test. So it says something about somebody's capabilities, but it doesn't tell the whole picture. A different way to look at it might be to divide the intelligence up in different subcategories. So you can have, and Sternberg made this model. He talked about analytic intelligence. So can you, do you have a certain ability to look at things from an abstract point of view? Creative intelligence, you see people being very good at the piano. Maybe they draw, they're very good at the arts. They create things from nothing. And you have practical intelligence, and those are pretty much people who probably are very capable at building an IKEA thing. And if you have one of those three, you can be considered intelligent, but you're intelligent in one specific area. So at schools these days, you can see that schools are trying to attempt to try and offer children a curriculum that fits their specific intelligence. So it could be analytic, creative, or practical. And if you look at the higher systems of education in Holland, it's mostly the analytical intelligence that is being addressed by kids, and not so much the creative intelligence.
From the society, yeah, from the social life, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I heard that in this area you have also this special people, Gardner, who has even split the talent more specifically, right?
Yes, even further. Yeah, if we look at Gardner's the theory of multiple intelligences, he described a lot of them. So he said, well, intelligence is not just a thing. You have an IQ of 130, then you can do basically anything. He made a subdivision, as you can see, verbal, so how good are you with communication, mathematical, that links strongly to the analytic intelligence we saw on the other slide, spatial, that has to do with where you are, navigating through a woods, for instance, stuff like that, just through traffic is a spatial thing. Bodily kinesthetic, people with talent for sports, you can place them in that subcategory. Musical intelligence, well, that explains itself really. So people have a talent to play certain music, know how to deal with rhythms and things like that. Interpersonal is about dealing with other people, communicating effectively with other people, communicating your own desires and emotions effectively to other people. And intrapersonal means how well you look inside of yourself. So do you know who you are? Do you know your own motivations? Can you explain your own behavior in certain situations? So know thyself, as the Greeks used to call it. And naturalist, so that has to do with being intelligent in nature, knowing about roots, about trees, being very good with animals, stuff like that. So Gardner made it very broad. And as you can see, not all of those intelligences are addressed in the Dutch educational system.
Yeah, the Dutch educational system. You know, we Chinese, we put a lot of priority and effort and focus on the children education. So I see in my friends' network, we talk a lot about, and we notice that the system are so different than the one we back home in China. So can you quickly give us an insight or overview of the Dutch educational system?
Of course.
And also for this special smart kids, how can we help them?
Yes. We start out with primary education. In the slide it's called basisonderwijs. And that's pretty much the same for all children. So if you think about the first slide, the 68% and the twice 13.5 with that, so roughly about 95%. All those children are in primary school. Not all children are capable of doing that well. So when you're on the left side of the scale and you have an IQ of maybe 85, 80 or less, you struggle at primary school. But luckily in our country we have educational systems that specialize in children who need more than the more general schools can offer. So these kids can go to a specialized form of education.
That's the VMBO part, right?
Yeah, and even below maybe kader we call it. When we have done that, that's the first, like when you're 12, you skip and you go to secondary education, or middle school you call it, I think. And that's roughly from your 12th to your 18th, if you have the higher form, or to your 16th.
Yeah.
16th.
Yeah, that's the half or to 16th and
Yes.
18th to the VVO. Yeah.
And from that point on, you either go to a more practical orientated form of education. So work with your hands, learn to be a plumber maybe, or ICT professional. And if you take this route, HAVO VWO, you are prepared to for a more academic form of education.
College and university.
Yes, exactly, yes. And one of the things in the Netherlands is that when you're on primary school, we already select which kind of direction you're probably going to take.
Yeah.
So when you're 12 years old, your future is roughly, it sounds a bit nasty,
Have
but
already a route, huh? Which path you are going through.
It's pretty much laid out for you.
Yeah.
And that means that for some children, some smart kids as well, who don't know already that they're talented in some way, as we saw in the slide with Gardner, there is a risk that they end up in a particular route that doesn't suit them very well. So that's how we do it. And as you can see, we focus on the main and the average. And that's, I think, a difference with China. In China, there's more focus for special talents that children have. Usually they are already seen in children from a very young age and stimulated to act on that talent and become even better at it.
Yeah.
We don't do that in the Netherlands so much. We pretty much treat everyone the same. From a very early age on, we think that's fair, that all children are treated equally, and in a way it is, but if you're very talented at something and you are not addressed to develop the talent further, then the talent might disappear. If you don't work on a talent, it might go.
Yeah.
So what we see, and that's a real risk in the educational system, and we'll get there with the next slide, is that you have children with a lot of talent who are not addressed on that talent, and don't really find out what they're very good at, and well, their confidence suffers for it because they don't find out and get to act on their talents. And if I can say one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
It's also a cultural thing, I think, because we in Holland, we call that Calvinistic. That's a way of looking at life and looking at one's talents. And we're not very fond of people who excel at a particular thing very well. We have the phrase, doe maar gewoon, dan doe je al gek genoeg. And that means that if somebody is very, very quick with reading or with math or anything else, it's not normal for us to celebrate that in a person. We tend to say, well, just try to cover it up a little bit, just act like everyone else does. So we ask a lot of adjustment from our kids. And that can lead to trouble down the line, because it's not nice to constantly hide your talent. It's nice to develop your talent and show it to everyone. That's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I think that's also the basic needs of every person,
Yes.
to develop on your talent. But you also mentioned that here in Holland, at the age of mostly at 12, that you are going to choose actually the future development. And some of the kids are not performing well, even they are smart and talented in the basisonderwijs. So how can you give some hints or advice for the parents? Because to ask for the teacher to pay attention to this kind of kids will be a little bit too much, because they have probably 30 kids in the class, and difficult, because normally they pay more attention and give more time to the kids who cannot follow.
Yes.
But the parents, when they think my kids are doing maybe not enough or underperforming, what kind of signs or characteristics that the smart or the gifted kids normally have? Maybe you can give a hint. So our parents, especially the people in front of the screen, can have a special look on that and have more observation, so that they say, hey, there's something different, right?
Yeah, a lot of signs. If you look at smart kids, there are some things you can pay attention to. A couple of things you could look out for is how your child started walking and talking. And it can go both ways. Normally a child starts moving around the floor and start using fantasy language about when they're, I think, 8-9 months old maybe. But some smart kids, they develop much quicker. So they could start talking or with fantasy language as young as 4 months old. They could start moving about, maybe even 6 months, 7 months, maybe even sooner. Or smart kids can wait longer for that to do that, but start at a much higher level. So in my experience, some very smart kids, they didn't start talking fantasy language and fantasy words, but the moment they started to speak, they spoke in full sentences. Or kids wouldn't just go about the floor, but just stand up out of their own all of a sudden and walk away. So those are very sure signs that your child is smarter than average. Another thing is language also, a very high and big vocabulary at a young age, a lot of word knowledge, and odd sense of humor. Smart kids have a strange sense of humor, and that sense of humor is usually something you find in older children or young adults. So it's a sophisticated, grown-up form of sense of humor.
Love to use words, playing with words.
Yes, play with words. They like that a lot. Yes, and they can show very high signs of motivation. If they're interested in a particular subject, they can just really dive into it and completely lose any sense of time. They're not as easily motivated to do things that are outside of their interests. So that's something that can be a problem at school later on. If you have to learn something, it doesn't really matter how smart you are, but if you learn something and you don't want to learn it because it's not interesting.
No interest, no motivation.
It's very hard to keep the focus on that. So you can see a very high level of focus and concentration on fields of interest. And you can see very low levels of concentration sometimes on things that don't find as interesting. What more can I tell? Let's see. They have a strong sense of autonomy, so they like to learn things on their own, by themselves. Are not always open for tips and
I'm always right, yeah?
Feedback, yeah, I'm always right. They're very quick thinkers, so if you think very quickly and you arrive at conclusions very quickly and you find that you usually are right, it's very hard to admit sometimes that you might be wrong, because your whole experience is that, well, 99% of the time you're right, so that's a bit difficult. A high sense of justice, so they are morally more developed than most children of their age. So you could see very young children being very upset when somebody else forgets a play date. Maybe we're talking about 4 years of age, 5 years of age, which young children do. They forget about things. But if you're very smart and highly gifted and you have a high sense of justice, you feel like you've been betrayed in a friendship, while your playdate is not thinking about friendship at all. It's just forgot about it and is not on that level to think about. So that's a risk as well, because sometimes it looks like smart children have difficulty socializing with other children of their age, but that can be because they have already developed a lot further on their moral development and their language development. So they don't feel as at home with children of their own age. It's like for them they are.
It doesn't fit to their
no,
group.
It's like they're with younger children. They're the same age, but
indeed.
They're cognitively more developed.
Yeah, from a private case which I saw is also that when the parents get the report from the school and they see the model kids, everything is perfect, polite and doing well and doing everything from themselves, and then they see at home that the kids totally turn out as a monster, and this probably is also a sign that you need to pay special attention to.
Yes.
And what's the reason behind that?
Well, one is the social element of it, because they go to school and young children, they want to belong. They want to belong in the group. They want to be accepted in the group. So if they notice that that doesn't come naturally and they have trouble fitting in, they spend a lot of energy trying to be that perfect buddy or friend, and that's costs so much energy that by the time they get home in a safe environment with their own parents, they cannot keep up that adjustment level any longer. So they fall back to
crying, shouting,
anger,
fighting.
fighting.
Get all this emotion out.
Yeah, they spend so much energy and willpower to be the perfect little student at school that they cannot do that anymore at home. So it sounds terrible, and it is, of course, if your child is so angry at home. But try to take some comfort in the fact that they do this because they feel safe with you as parents. The ideal situation would be that not that your child doesn't show that behavior at home, but that your child shows that behavior at school as well. Because if you, as a child, if you can tell your teacher or your friends what you like and you don't like, and what is nice for you to have and not so nice, then people can relate to you better and take care of your needs. And if you don't and just try to adapt and not say anything, then nobody knows exactly what to do with you. So it's good if you show your emotions at school as well.
Indeed, but in the reality, we see that it's also not wished behavior, so it's cause issues. But in general, if you look at these signs, I see a lot of talent and a lot of giftedness, and this kind of people, I mean, in China, we wish to be one of them, that you can learn quickly, you understand things quickly, and you can make yourself much more easier in the society or in the school. Like a friend of me, her daughter is definitely highly gifted, and in her middle school, 6 years, she is in the top class of the whole year homeschool, and she made friends and going to school most of the time happily because she has always very good scores. But I hear in Holland, if you see that, it's very often not obvious that the gifted children have a happy life in their school.
Yeah. That's an important point to bring up, because if you are seen for your talents at a young age, and you get to be in an opportunity where you can be talented in your field and be with like-minded talented people, you have good peers around you to whom you can relate very well. And then your talent can be celebrated and shared with others. In Holland, like we discussed earlier, we have a tendency to say, well, just don't show your talents too much, because you're not that special, because you know or are capable of doing something more than others. So we have a tendency to suppress our talents, and that means that it's hard to celebrate that. And if you're very good at something, and let's say you have an IQ of 130 and you get to school, if you get to school and you are confronted with the educational content school has provided for you, two things can happen. Well, actually, three things can happen. It can be way too hard for you. And then you struggle at school a lot, too much actually, and then we have specialized schools that can take care of kids like that. Or you get educational content and that fits your level quite nicely, and that means that you are triggered to develop yourself. So sometimes the content is but just a little bit above what you're capable of, and that stimulates you to grow and to become better at that specific skill. Yeah. So when that happens, the content challenges you. And that means that on a practical level, you start developing practical skills. Think about time management, to keep your focus for a longer period of time, because if you have to do something which is difficult, you'll learn that it's important to concentrate yourself for, let's say, 15 minutes. You learn a way of dealing with tests, how to read a book. You learn how to deal with making mistakes and frustration. If things don't happen very quickly for you, you don't understand it immediately, well, you learn that that's normal, that's part of learning. So if you do that, you deal with frustration, and that means that at a higher level, your high skills start developing as well. And that means that you're capable of reflecting on the way you prepared for a test. You can reflect on the way you deal with certain challenges, and if you notice that, well, maybe you're not too happy about the outcome, you can change your way of approaching it and try something else. And that means on life skills is not are you good at living life? And that means that you can deal with hardship. So if things don't go your way, you're not just dropping everything and say, oh, my life is over and I can't do anything. You think of ways to make it better for yourself. So if somebody has negative feedback for you or is critical about something, it doesn't floor you right away, but you can deal with that. So that's something that you can deal with because you've grown some muscle in life, so you're not easily defeated by it. And you take responsibility for things that go well in your life, and you take responsibility for things that, well, might have been better in your life. So you're what we call in Dutch ontwikkelingsgericht. That happens if you are challenged properly. But and to come back to your question from what should parents look for and how to deal with their children, if your child is smarter than average, then you can say that on average the educational content your child is going to receive at school is not going to be challenging enough. So at first it seems nice because your child comes home with good grades, scores are okay, everything seems fine. If you just look at what the end result, the numbers are, well, you see 9s and 10s and, well, things are going great. It's very nice. But on a practical level, you see that these children don't learn to concentrate very well because they can pretty much just produce any answer out of the top of their head. They don't need to think about it, they don't need to plan, they don't need to focus hard to come up with the right answer, they just know the answer. So practically, they stay behind a little bit. So they have sometimes difficulty focusing because they don't have to get good results. They have less than average exposure to making mistakes and frustration. Because if you can do pretty much anything and everything works out well for you, you don't deal with frustration as much as children who have to do something difficult maybe every day, maybe even twice or 3 times a day. So on a practical level, you see that these kids don't develop the same kind of skill set that children do that are challenged by the content they have. That also has a negative effect on high skills because if you don't really have to think about when to start preparing for a test, you don't have to deal with hardship or focusing, you don't really know very well how you get good results. So
don't have a strategy, huh?
You don't have it. So I've spoken with very smart kids with very good scores. And so you just got an A+ for your test. How did you do that? Then smart children usually say, I'm not sure. I do the test and I get this result. That is what happened up till now, always. But if I ask them, how do you prepare for a next test so you can get a good result again? They say, well, I really don't know. I just hope it will be an A+ again. So they're very smart. They have a lot of high scores. And paradoxically, they don't have the confidence to match that. If you struggle every day and you learn practical skills and you learn higher skills, so you can reflect on your own strategy and assess if that was a right one or maybe you need an adjustment. These kids, they know that they can deal with any kind of challenge because they have a whole skill set they can fall back on. They can put forth. But if you just happen to get high scores and you don't really do anything for it, you don't even have to think about it, well then you don't develop the same kind of confidence. And that brings us to life skills, and that means that if you have good grades, you go to school, you have good grades from, let's say, your 6th up till your 15th, then it's very difficult when your scores are going to drop dramatically when you're 16 years old and all of a sudden you're getting really bad results. Then it becomes almost existential from who am I? I always used to have high scores and now I don't. And then on life skills, it's very easy to give up because you really don't know what to do. So to combat this, as a parent, make sure that your child gets the challenge it needs to develop optimally. And if your kid is smarter, then ask school if maybe what they offer on content, if you can just try and condense that a little bit so they can go quicker about it, and then offer them different content that challenges them. Because if you challenge a smart kid on the level they're capable of performing at.
So what you say is that as parents we need to communicate with school, to explain the situation, to give the flexibility so that the kids is allowed to be stimulated or challenged in other areas. Not necessarily more material, more content, but something maybe deeper or broader.
Exactly, yeah. What you want is that your child learns to deal with being outside of their comfort zone, because if you learn that, then you can basically deal with a lot of life challenges when you're grown up. Another thing, don't be fooled by the scores of your child. So if your child comes home and says, well, I had 2 A+ today, and you say, oh, that's great. It is great. Of course, that's great if the scores are good. But if you follow that up with a follow-up question, you ask, what did you do to get this result? And your child says, well, nothing really. Well, that's cause for concern, because that means that although they are getting good grades, they're probably not developing practical skills and high skills, which they need later on in life. When they get to secondary school or maybe to university. So it's always good to ask about what was your effort, how did you approach this, and how much effort did you put into it, because that is better to know than just the end result. Yeah,
so tip for the parents is not only looking at the grades, but really look at how much input your kids is doing with that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So if somebody gets an A+ for something they did nothing for, well then you need to have different content, so you kind of force or stimulate your child to start putting in effort and start developing those practical skills they need.
Hey, thank you, Dick, for so much information and advices. Maybe before we close the program, can I ask you to share a private story or cases to give us some more insight?
Sure, of course. If I look at my own development, this is what we discussed before. This is what happened to me. School was very easy, and I didn't have a chance to learn practical skills, enough practical skills to deal with that moment in my life when things started to get difficult. So
you said when you were 15, right?
Yeah, when I was 15, 16, the educational content just kept piling up. All of a sudden, everything kicked into high gear, and I was, well, everyone just assumed that I would be able to deal with that, and I didn't. I slowly lost grip. My score started to drop. I started doubting myself. So is this the right place for me to be? And it was definitely the right place for me to be, but I needed more guidance and more counseling to get those talents I had in me out of me. And that didn't happen. So unfortunately, my parents really didn't see me for the talents I had. Neither did a lot of the educators at the school. They just kind of let me be. So I was more or less just
left for yourself.
Yeah, trying to get by, and that went okay. I still could go to the next grade until the eindexamen. Then I didn't pass, so I didn't have a diploma. And I had a pretty rough 10 years, I think, in which I did get my diploma eventually. I went to college, university, and I dropped out again. I did that for 2 years. I had a lot of different jobs. So for me, it was a very long journey and adventure to re-find my own talents. So, and because I did a lot of underperforming jobs, things that were not matching with my own level, I used to be very good at a lot of things. So a lot of people would say, well, you can do the job the best of everyone else, but that was because, well, it wasn't at the level I was capable of operating, only I didn't have the belief and the confidence in myself that I could do so. So maybe the most important thing that I would give to people, to parents as an advice, talk to your child. Ask about how much effort they put in. Try to see if what your child does, is that average? Is it below average? Is it above average? Because if your child doesn't do anything at all and still gets good grades, that means they have risk on the practical skill development and the higher skill. So yeah, talk to your child. Ask about their day. Ask about school. And make sure that they know, your child knows that, well, maybe because of their talent, they have it pretty easy at school, and that certain risks are involved. That being smart is not a recipe for being happy. And I think that's a big difference. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Dick.
Thank
you for your openness and sharing. Okay, now today Dick shared with us the definition of IQ, talented, and also the science characteristics of smart kids, and with the Dutch system, so in Holland. I hope that his own story or his advices can give some inspiration for the parents in front of the screen now. Thank you, and maybe see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.